The wind howled, a mournful dirge ripping through the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling port. Rusting cranes stood like ancient forgotten sentinels, their steel limbs groaning under the relentless assault of the winter storm. Snow, a merciless white blanket, whipped horizontally, stinging everything it touched. It was a landscape of desolation, a testament to time and neglect, where only the hardiest of life dared to linger. Deep within this forgotten graveyard of ambition and industry, a flicker of life persisted. Tucked away in the belly of a half-collapsed shipping container, a hulking silhouette stirred. This was Rex, a German shepherd, once magnificent, now a shadow of his former self. His once glossy, black and tan coat was matted with ice, and grime his ribs starkly defined beneath a thin layer of fur. A jagged scar, a relic of some forgotten skirmish, ran across his left flank, a constant ache in the biting cold. Rex shivered, not just from the cold, but from the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. For days, perhaps weeks, he had scrounged for scraps, a forgotten and lonely spectre in this forgotten place. His eyes, a haunting amber, held a weariness that spoke of endless battles fought and lost, of betrayal and of a profound isolating abandonment. He had known the warmth of a hearth, the comfort of a loving hand, but those memories were now distant, painful echoes in the vast silence of his solitude. The container, barely offering more than a flimsy shield against the elements, groaned with each gust of wind, threatening to give way entirely. Rex pressed himself deeper into the grimy corner, trying to conserve the last vestiges of his body heat. Every breath was a frosty plume, every movement a painful reminder of his dwindling strength. He had sought this broken port as his final refuge, a place to disappear, to simply cease to be. The world outside had proven too cruel, its promises hollow, its kindness fleeting. He had given his loyalty, his unwavering devotion, only to be cast aside, broken and unwanted. The bitterness was a cold companion, rivaling the chill that permeated his very bones. He closed his eyes, welcoming the creeping numbness, hoping for an end to the ceaseless struggle. The storm, in its furious symphony, seemed to be composing his epitaph. He was just a dog lost and alone, waiting for the inevitable. Just as the welcomed numbness began to creep over Rex, a sound faint and fragile pierced through the cacophony of the storm. It wasn't the shriek of the wind or the groan of buckling metal. It was something else, something utterly out of place in this desolate, dying world. A high-pitched, insistent whimper. Rex's eyes, previously glazed with resignation, flickered open. He lifted his massive head, tilting it slightly, his ears swiveling, trying to pinpoint the source of the ethereal cry. His body stiff and aching, tensed. His instincts dulled by days of starvation and despair began to stir, a tiny ember flickering in the cold darkness of his being. He was a creature of the wild, yes, but also of loyalty and protection. And this sound so small, so utterly vulnerable, called to something deep within him. The whimper came again, stronger this time, a thin thread of sound that tugged at the frayed edges of his canine soul. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't prey, it was something helpless. And in that moment, the crushing weight of his own suffering seemed to lessen, replaced by a nascent curiosity, a flicker of purpose. He pushed himself up, every muscle, protesting, his legs trembling beneath him. He sniffed the frigid air, his nose still remarkably keen, trying to decipher the scent carried on the icy gusts. The sound seemed to emanate from deeper within the same container, closer than he had initially thought. He took a hesitant step, then another, his paws crunching softly on scattered debris and frozen dust. The whimper grew a little louder, a desperate, undeniable plea. It was a sound that should not exist here in this abandoned husk of a port, amidst the biting cold and the unforgiving wind. It defied logic, shattered the bleak silence he had come to accept as his fate. He reached a section of the container where a panel, once securely fastened, had been torn loose by the storm, creating a narrow, jagged opening. A sliver of light, almost imperceptible through the swirling snow, pierced through the gloom beyond. The whimpering was undeniably coming from the other side. A low growl rumbled in Rex's chest, a primal warning, but it wasn't directed at the sound itself. It was a guttural expression of confusion, of the unexpected, and a subconscious readiness to protect whatever lay beyond that broken barrier. He pushed his nose into the gap, sniffing cautiously. The scent was strange, unsettling, yet undeniably alive. It was a delicate aroma, unlike anything he'd encountered in the wild. His heart, slow and heavy moments before, began to thump with a new, insistent rhythm. The pain in his stomach, the ache in his bones faded into the background. Something extraordinary was happening. Something that demanded his attention, demanded action, even from a creature on the brink of surrender. He braced himself then with a surge of unexpected strength, nudged the loose panel further inward, widening the opening just enough for him to see inside. The whimper grew louder, more urgent, filling the small dark space with its tiny, fragile sound. Rex nudged the loose panel inward, widening the jagged opening just enough for him to peer into the deeper recesses of the container. The interior was a cavern of shadow, barely penetrated by the frigid grey light filtering through cracks in the corrugated metal walls. But then he saw it. Nestled amongst a pile of tattered, grease-stained tarpaulins in a makeshift hollow was an impossibly small bundle. It was swaddled in what looked like a thin, soiled blanket, barely offering protection against the biting cold that permeated every inch of the container. From within this pathetic cocoon, the whimpering intensified a tiny, desperate sound that seemed to reverberate in the vast, empty space. He pushed the panel further, squeezing his large frame through the narrow aperture, his muscles protesting with every inch of movement. The air inside was even colder, stagnant and heavy, with the scent of damp metal and something else. A faint, sweet scent, unmistakable, yet utterly out of place. He crept closer, his instincts warring between apprehension and an overwhelming sense of curiosity. His nose twitched, confirming the scent. It was the scent of a human infant. He had smelled it before, briefly, years ago, when he was a family dog catching a fleeting whiff from a passing stroller. But never like this. Never so raw, so vulnerable, so completely alone. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, the sight that greeted him sent a jolt through his starved and weary body. The bundle stirred, and a tiny mottled face emerged from the folds of the blanket. Two miniature fists, no bigger than his own dew claws, flailed weakly. And then he saw them. Eyes, wide, tear-filled, dark pools that stared up at him with an innocence that shattered the hardened shell around his heart. It was a baby, a human baby. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. Not a stray cat, not an abandoned puppy. A human child left to the mercy of the elements in this forgotten, frozen tomb. The injustice of it, the sheer, unthinkable cruelty, ignited a spark of something primal within him, a ferocious protective rage that momentarily eclipsed his own suffering. The baby whimpered again, a thin, reedy sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air. Its lips were blue, its skin unnaturally pale, almost translucent. It shivered uncontrollably, tiny limbs convulsing beneath the threadbare blanket. Rex lowered his head, sniffing gently at the small bundle. He could feel the cold radiating from the tiny body, a cold that promised a swift and tragic end if nothing was done. His mind, simple yet profound, registered the immediate threat. This fragile creature, this helpless being, was in grave danger. He, Rex, the discarded, the forgotten, was the only one there. And in that desolate, snow-battered port, a profound, improbable connection was forged. The magnificent yet broken German shepherd, on the verge of succumbing to despair, found a new, desperate purpose in the utterly unthinkable discovery of a human infant. He knew with an instinct far deeper than training that he could not leave it. He would not. The primal growl that had rumbled in Rex's chest, subsided, replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible whine. His protective instincts, dulled by months of neglect and starvation, surged to the forefront, overpowering the gnawing emptiness in his stomach and the ache in his bones. This tiny, vulnerable human, shivering and whimpering, ignited a spark of his true nature, that of a guardian, a protector. He nudged the baby again, this time with his wet nose, a gentle, inquisitive sniff. The infant stirred a tiny hand, flailing weakly, brushing against his snout. The skin was impossibly soft, delicate, and cold. Too cold. A shiver not of fear or pain, but of urgent concern, ran through Rex's massive frame. He knew with an animal certainty that the cold was an enemy as deadly as any predator. Without conscious thought, he lowered himself slowly, carefully, onto the grimy floor of the container. His body stiff and protesting, unwound, until he was a large protective arc around the fragile bundle. He nudged the baby again, more insistently, this time guiding the tiny form closer to his thick matted fur. Then, with a gentle, almost hesitant movement, he curled his body around the infant, creating a living, breathing shield against the brutal winter air. The baby's whimpers lessened, replaced by tiny, ragged breaths. Rex could feel the fragile warmth of the small body radiating through the thin blanket, a warmth he desperately sought to preserve. He rested his chin on his paws, his amber eyes fixed on the baby's face, watching every tiny movement, every flutter of the eyelids. He let out a low, rumbling purr, a sound meant to soothe, to reassure. It was a sound he hadn't made in years, a relic of a past life, when he was cherished, when he was safe. Hours passed, marked only by the relentless howl of the wind and the subtle shifts in the dim light. Rex remained motionless, a furry fortress. He felt the familiar pangs of hunger, sharper now than ever, but he ignored them. The baby was paramount. Its fragile life depended on his warmth, his presence. His training, his innate loyalty surged, overriding the instinct for self-preservation that had kept him alive in these harsh months. He was no longer just a stray surviving. He was a sentinel guarding the most precious, unexpected treasure he had ever encountered. He heard the baby cough, a weak, shallow sound that sent a jolt of alarm through him. He licked the tiny forehead gently, as if offering comfort, offering life. The baby stirred, nuzzling unconsciously into his fur, drawing closer to the warmth. It was a tiny, trusting gesture that solidified the bond, making it unbreakable. In this desolate, broken port, amidst the biting cold and the unforgiving snow, a profound and beautiful truth began to unfold, that even in the face of despair, an unexpected bond, forged in the crucible of desperation, could ignite hope and summon forth the purest, most selfless acts of love. Rex, the abandoned, the broken, had found his purpose. He was a protector, and this tiny, helpless human was his world. The days that followed blurred into a harrowing tapestry of desperation and fierce, unwavering devotion. For Rex, time ceased to be measured in hours or daylight, but in the baby's soft, fragile breaths and the increasingly desperate search for sustenance. The biting cold was a constant, malevolent presence, gnawing at their exposed sanctuary. Rex knew he couldn't stay curled around the baby indefinitely, not if they were to survive. Hunger, a dull ache that had become a roaring fire, began to demand his attention. But leaving the baby, even for a moment, was a torment he could barely bear. His instincts screamed at him not to abandon his precious charge. Yet the baby's faint cries, now weaker and more infrequent, spurred him into action. He would slip out of the container, his movements swift and silent, a gaunt phantom blending into the swirling snow. His hunting grounds were the desolate stretches of the port and the fringes of the nearest town, a place he usually avoided due to its human inhabitants. He scavenged through overflowing dumpsters, behind derelict restaurants, his keen nose sifting through the putrid scents for anything edible. A discarded crust of bread, a bone, picked, clean, a half-eaten, frozen piece of fruit. Anything was a victory. He fought off aggressive stray dogs, his teeth bared, a low guttural growl warning them away from his meager finds. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for two. Each time he found something, no matter how small, he would race back to the container, his heart pounding, with a mixture of hope and fear. Had the baby cried? Was it colder? Had something happened? The anxiety gnawed at him, a constant companion on his solitary forays. Once back inside, he would meticulously nudge the smallest, softest scraps of food towards the baby's tiny mouth. He knew instinctively that the infant couldn't eat solid food, but perhaps the scent, the faint moisture would offer some comfort, some illusion of nourishment. He would then consume his own meager portion, chewing slowly every bite, a desperate attempt to gather enough energy to continue his guardianship. The baby whom Rex had silently named Little One was fading. Its skin, once just pale now, had an alarming bluish tint, especially around the lips and fingertips. The whimper had become a soft, almost imperceptible murmur, and the tiny movements were few and far between. Rex would nudge it, lick its forehead gently, trying to elicit a response, a sign of life. Each time the baby stirred even slightly, a wave of profound relief would wash over him. One particularly brutal night, the storm intensified, rattling the very foundations of the broken container. Snow drifted in through every crack, forming miniature dunes around them. Rex pressed himself even closer to the baby, trying to create an impenetrable barrier of warmth. He shivered violently, his own body temperature dropping, but he refused to loosen his embrace. He could feel the baby's breaths becoming shallower, more labored. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his weariness. He let out a mournful howl, a sound swallowed by the raging storm, a cry of despair and desperate hope. He had faced countless hardships, but this, the slow, inevitable decline of the fragile life he had sworn to protect, was the most agonizing. He would not give up, Not yet. Not while there was a single beat in his weary heart. He would fight for the little one until his last breath. The sixth day dawned, if one could call, the muted, icy light filtering through the snow-choked cracks. A dawn. Rex lay still, his body a numb shell, his focus entirely on the tiny, fragile being nestled against his chest. The baby was barely stirring now, its breathing shallow, almost imperceptible. A profound despair, cold and heavy, as the snow outside settled over Rex. He had fought, scrounged, and protected with every fiber of his being, but the relentless winter, the crushing hunger, seemed to be winning. He had failed, just as the last tendrils of hope threatened to dissipate. A new scent drifted into the container, faint but distinct, cutting through the damp, metallic air. It was the scent of wood smoke, of something cooked, and most powerfully, the unmistakable tang of salt and fish. It was a human scent, yet different from the hurried, indifferent smells of the townspeople he usually encountered. This one carried a hint of age, of weathered hands, and the sea. Rex's ears perked, a flicker of his former alertness returning. He lifted his head, sniffing cautiously. The scent was getting stronger, accompanied by a slow, rhythmic crunching sound, like heavy boots on frozen gravel. It was a man walking the desolate path that bordered the abandoned port, a path rarely trodden, and especially in such weather. This man was Elias Hemlock, a solitary fisherman, his face etched with the lines of 70 winters, his hands gnarled from a lifetime of battling the sea. He rarely ventured to this decaying part of the port, preferring the solitude of the open ocean. But today, a broken part on his aging boat had forced him ashore, and a shortcut through the abandoned docks seemed the quickest way back to his humble cottage. He trudged through the knee-deep snow, his old oilskin coat flapping in the wind, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. Elias wasn't looking for anything. He was simply enduring, as he always had. But then a sound, faint and almost swallowed by the storm's roar, pricked his hearing. It was a low, mournful whimper, not human, not quite animal as he knew it. He stopped, tilting his head, his seasoned ears straining against the wind. It came again, a desperate, drawn-out plea. Curiosity, a trait Elias had never lost, despite his years, stirred within him. It seemed to come from one of the half-collapsed shipping containers, a place he usually gave wide berth, believing it to be the haunt of rats and shadows. He hesitated, his logical mind telling him to continue home, to escape the brutal cold, but the sound so raw, so utterly forlorn, tugged at something deep within him. He veered off the path, sinking deeper into the unbroken snow, his heavy boots making slow progress. As he drew closer to the container, Rex and the baby, occupied, the whimpering grew louder, unmistakable now, as the distressed cry of a large dog. And then, woven into that canine lament, he heard it, a faint, reedy sound, almost like a dying gasp, a human baby's cry. Elias froze. His blood ran cold, despite the biting wind. A dog, yes, but a baby. Here it was unthinkable. He pushed aside the initial shock, his heart beginning to pound, with a mixture of dread and a fierce, urgent need to investigate. He edged towards the gaping hole in the container, the source of the desperate sounds. Just as he was about to peer inside, a sudden, blinding whiteout descended. The wind, already ferocious, intensified into a howling gale, snatching Elias's breath away. Snow, thick and disorienting, swirled around him, reducing visibility to mere inches. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of white. He staggered, losing his footing, on the treacherous icy ground. His old bones ached, and his mind, though sharp, was momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden ferocity of the squall. He knew, with a fisherman's deep respect for nature's fury, that to press on blindly now would be suicide. He had to seek immediate shelter, regroup, and return. The sound of the dog and the baby, though now muffled by the blizzard, echoed in his mind, a haunting promise he desperately hoped he could keep. This unexpected glimpse of hope, cruelly snatched away by the storm's unpredictable wrath, added a new, agonizing layer of suspense to the unfolding tragedy. The blizzard, though fierce, passed as swiftly as it had arrived, leaving behind a world muffled and pristine under a fresh, deep layer of snow. Elias Hemlock, battered but resolute, stumbled back to his cottage, his mind racing. The image of the dog, the faint cry of the baby. It had not been a delusion. He burst through his door, startling his few elderly neighbors, who were just venturing out to clear their stoops. "There's a baby," Elias gasped his breath, coming in ragged puffs, in the old port, with a dog, a German shepherd. Freezing disbelief was the first reaction. "A baby, Elias? Are you sure the cold hasn't gotten to you?" Mrs. Henderson, a woman known for her practicality and skepticism, clutched her shawl tighter. "I heard it clear as day," Elias insisted, his voice raspy with urgency. "And the dog, it was protecting it." It took every ounce of Elias's credibility, forged over decades of honest toil and unwavering integrity, to convince them. The idea of a baby abandoned in such a place, guarded by a wild dog, was simply too fantastic, too tragic. But the raw conviction in the old fisherman's eyes, coupled with the lingering cold and the unspoken understanding of life's harsh realities in their isolated community, slowly wore down their skepticism. A few hardy souls, weathered by the same unforgiving environment, grabbed shovels and thick coats. "Lead the way." Elias, Mr. Davies, a gruff but kind-hearted ex-lumberjack, finally conceded, his brow furrowed with concern. They trudged back, Elias leading the way, his heart pounding with a desperate urgency. Every second felt like an hour. The snow, now settled, made progress arduous, but the thought of the helpless infant spurred them onward. Inside the container, Rex heard them coming long before they reached the broken entrance. The crunch of multiple footsteps, the murmur of human voices. It ignited a deep-seated weariness within him. He shifted his body, tensing, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was a protector, and these approaching figures, though human, represented an unknown threat. He would not let them harm his little one. Elias peered through the gap in the container, his gaze falling upon the immense German shepherd curled protectively around a small, still bundle. The dog's amber eyes, fierce and unyielding, met his. Elias saw not aggression, but a raw, desperate protectiveness. He raised his hands, slowly, palms open, a universal sign of peace. "Easy, boy," Elias murmured, his voice gentle, seasoned by years of calming agitated gulls and wary fish. "We're here to help the little one. We need to get them out of the cold." Rex's growl deepened, a defiant rumble. He pressed himself closer to the baby, his body a solid barrier. He had been betrayed by humans before. He would not allow it again, not with his little one's life at stake. The other villagers hung back, wary of the large, seemingly feral dog. "He looks dangerous, Elias," one whispered, gripping his shovel tighter. "Maybe we should wait for animal control." But just then, a sound, faint yet unmistakable, drifted from within Rex's protective embrace. A weak, thin whimper, the baby's cry. It was barely audible, a testament to its fading strength, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Rex heard it, and his focus shifted momentarily, breaking from the standoff. His eyes flickered to the baby, a flicker of profound anguish crossing his face. The whimper was a desperate plea for help, a sound he himself could not answer. He was exhausted, starving, and now confronted by these well-meaning but intimidating figures. Elias saw the dog's internal struggle, the momentary hesitation, the agony in its amber eyes. He understood. This dog wasn't protecting the baby from them, but for them, for anyone who could offer the help it desperately needed, but could not provide alone. Taking a gamble, Elias slowly knelt down, ignoring the snow soaking his trousers. He spoke softly, continuously, his voice a low, soothing drone. "Good boy, brave boy. You saved the baby, didn't you? We'll help you both." He extended a gloved hand, slowly, carefully, towards Rex, not to touch, but to show trust. "We just want to make the baby warm, safe." Rex watched him, his body still rigid, but the defiance in his eyes began to waver, replaced by a desperate, weary hope. He looked from the baby to Elias, then back again. The whimper came again, weaker this time, a tiny, almost inaudible gasp. It was the sound of a life slipping away. And in that moment, Rex made the hardest decision of his life. He shifted slowly, reluctantly, just enough to expose the bundled infant. It was an act of profound trust, a surrender, born not of defeat, but of an overwhelming love, and a desperate plea for the only help that could now save his little one. The villagers collectively gasped, their skepticism replaced by awe, and a surge of shared humanity. The rescue could finally begin. The scene that unfolded in the abandoned container was one Elias Hemlock would recount for the rest of his days, always with a tremor in his voice and a profound awe in his eyes. With Rex's reluctant yet ultimately trusting shift, the tiny bundle was fully revealed. It was indeed a baby, no more than a few months old, its small face pinched with cold, its skin a ghostly white. Mrs. Henderson, despite her earlier skepticism, was the first to react. Her motherly instincts, long dormant, surged to the forefront. With surprising agility for her age, she carefully knelt her hands, trembling as she gently scooped up the infant. The baby was impossibly light a feather in her arms and terribly cold. "Merciful heavens," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This poor, poor soul." As she cradled the baby, a faint, almost inaudible whimper escaped its lips. Mrs. Henderson immediately began to murmur soothing words, rubbing the tiny limbs, desperately trying to impart warmth. Mr. Davies, ever practical, had already produced a thick woolen blanket from his bag, one he usually kept for his own chilly fishing trips. They carefully wrapped the baby, cocooning it against the relentless cold. Meanwhile, Elias focused on Rex. The great dog, having relinquished his charge, now stood a few feet back, watching their every move with an intense, wary gaze. His body still trembled, but a different kind of tremor now. Exhaustion, relief, and a lingering fear. "Good boy, Rex," Elias repeated, extending a hand slowly this time, with a small piece of dried fish he'd pulled from his pocket. The scent drifted towards Rex, and his gaunt frame quivered with hunger. But he didn't lunge. He remained still, his eyes fixed on the baby in Mrs. Henderson's arms. It was as if he needed to confirm its safety before he could allow himself even a moment of comfort. Only when the baby was fully swaddled and the small group began to carefully make their way back through the snow did Rex finally take a hesitant step forward, accepting the offering from Elias. He devoured it in 2 bites, then looked up, his amber eyes meeting Elias's, a flicker of gratitude mingling with the still present weariness. The journey back to the main road, though, short, felt interminable. Elias's neighbors, their faces grim, took turns carrying the precious bundle, shielding it from the lingering wind. Once they reached the edge of town, word had already spread like wildfire. A small crowd had gathered, a mix of shock, horror, and profound curiosity etched on their faces. An ambulance summoned by one of the neighbors, who had rushed ahead, was already waiting. Paramedics moved swiftly, taking the baby from Mrs. Henderson's arms. The infant was immediately placed in a portable incubator, its tiny form hooked up to monitors. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, their faces grave as they assessed the baby's critical condition: severe hypothermia, acute dehydration, and malnutrition. One of them rattled off, his voice clipped and urgent. Lucky to be alive, very, very lucky. As the ambulance prepared to leave, a young, eager local reporter, having somehow caught wind of the unfolding drama, pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand. "Can anyone tell me what happened? Who found the baby?" Elias, still catching his breath, gestured towards Rex, who stood protectively beside him, his eyes still following the ambulance. "The dog. He found it. He kept it alive. He's the hero." The reporter's eyes widened, her gaze shifting from the ambulance to the large, scarred German shepherd. A German shepherd was found sleeping in a broken port. What a baby did next left everyone in tears. "This is incredible, a true miracle," she exclaimed, already formulating the sensational headline. Rex was taken to the local animal shelter, a small, clean facility run by a compassionate woman named Eleanor Vance. She had heard the news and was prepared for his arrival. Though still wary of humans, Rex allowed Elias to lead him inside. Eleanor saw the dog's emaciation, the scars, but also the deep intelligence and gentle nature in his eyes. She knew instantly that this was no ordinary stray. While the baby, now safely in the hospital, fought for its life, the questions began to mount. Who would abandon a child in such a place, in such conditions? Where were its parents? The small town, usually quiet and predictable, buzzed with speculation. Whispers of foul play, of dark secrets, began to circulate, casting a pall over the miraculous rescue. The hero dog's incredible act had brought a new life into the light, but it had also unwittingly illuminated a shadow of profound injustice and a deeper mystery waiting to be uncovered: the miraculous rescue of the port baby. As the local papers quickly dubbed, her sent ripples far beyond the small snow-laden coastal town. News vans buzzing with journalists descended, eager to capture the heartwarming tale of the heroic German shepherd and the tiny life he saved. But beneath the surface of public awe and celebration, a grim reality began to settle in for Detective Miles Harding. Harding was a man shaped by the unforgiving streets of a much larger city, his face perpetually etched with the weariness of 1,000 solved cases and countless unsolved tragedies. He had been a detective for 25 years, and in that time he had seen enough human depravity to curdle milk. The story of a dog saving a baby was certainly a good headline, but to Harding it was merely a symptom of a deeper, far more disturbing crime. Babies, especially in winter, didn't just appear in abandoned shipping containers by accident. Someone had put her there, and that someone was his target. He arrived at the modest local police station, a place usually concerned with petty theft, and the occasional bar brawl to find it abuzz with unaccustomed activity. Files were scattered, phones rang incessantly, and the scent of stale coffee hung heavy in the air. Harding, a man of methodical precision, ignored the chaos. He went straight to the whiteboard where the few known facts were scrawled. Victim female infant estimated 2 to 3 months old, critical but stable. Location abandoned shipping container, old fishing port. Discovery Elias Hemlock, local fisherman. Primary caretaker, German shepherd, currently at local animal shelter. Harding picked up the phone and made his first call to the hospital. Dr. Aris Thorne, the attending pediatrician, was terse but informative. She's a fighter detective. Hypothermia was severe pneumonia setting in, but she's responding to treatment. We estimate she was exposed for at least 48 to 72 hours. An incredible resilience, really. Any identifying marks, birth defects? Anything that might tell us who she is? Harding asked, his pen poised. Nothing obvious. Healthy, otherwise remarkably so considering. No birth defects, no signs of previous abuse, just abandoned. Dr. Thorne's voice held a note of quiet fury. Next, Harding visited the animal shelter. Not out of any particular fondness for dogs, but because the German shepherd was a key witness, however unconventional. Eleanor Vance, the shelter manager, greeted him, her eyes shining with admiration for Rex. "He's magnificent, detective," she said, stroking Rex's head through the kennel bars. "And so gentle, despite everything he's been through. He hasn't stopped looking for the baby, though. You can see it in his eyes." Harding observed Rex, a gaunt but powerful presence. His amber eyes indeed filled with a profound sadness. He wasn't interested in the emotional narrative. He was looking for clues. Has he been chipped? Any collar or identification? When he was found, Eleanor shook her head. Nothing. We're running scans checking local lost dog registries, but nothing yet. He's a stray or was abandoned long before this. Harding's cynical mind immediately dismissed the dog as a mere coincidence, a random act of animal instinct. He was probably just seeking shelter from the storm, found the baby, and huddled for warmth. He mused aloud, more to himself than to Eleanor. Eleanor's expression tightened. "With all due respect, detective, I have seen a lot of animals. This dog, he's special. He saved that baby. It wasn't just about warmth for him." Harding merely grunted, unconvinced. He turned his attention to the local gossips, the unofficial historians of the town. He started with Mrs. Gable at the general store, a woman who knew everyone's business. He inquired about recent pregnancies, new arrivals, anyone who might have seemed secretive or withdrawn. Mrs. Gable, delighted by the attention, offered a torrent of half-truths and rumors mostly about this strange new family who had moved in a few years ago, or the quiet girl who always seemed to be hiding something. His cynicism was a shield protecting him from the emotional weight of his work. But even Harding felt a flicker of unease as he delved into the whispers of the town. There was a current of unspoken tensions here, a carefully maintained facade that he sensed was about to crack. The small, isolated community, normally a haven of peace, held a darker underbelly, and the abandoned baby was merely the first thread of a tightly woven secret that he was determined to unravel. His investigation was just beginning, and he knew with a veteran's cold certainty that the story of the hero dog was just the beginning of a much more complex and painful truth. Detective Harding's investigation into the abandoned baby began to coalesce around two distinct, yet potentially interconnected threads. The first led him to a small, perpetually damp diner on the outskirts of town, aptly named the Rusty Anchor. Its greasy windows and chipped paint spoke of decades of neglect, and the sparse clientele were mostly local fishermen and truckers passing through. It was here that he found Sarah. Sarah was a wisp of a woman in her early 20s, her movements quick and furtive like a cornered mouse. Her uniform perpetually stained with coffee rings and grease hung loosely on her thin frame. Her eyes, a murky brown, held a perpetual sadness, a deep-seated fear that even the brightest morning couldn't chase away. Harding had heard her name whispered by Mrs. Gable. That quiet girl from the diner always looks like she's seen a ghost. He ordered a black coffee, letting the silence hang heavy between them. Sarah nervously wiped down the counter, avoiding his gaze. "You work here long, Sarah?" Harding asked, his voice deceptively soft, a practiced technique to disarm. She flinched. "A few years, detective. Since high school." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Anyone new around here lately? Or anyone suddenly leave?" He watched her closely. Her hands tightened on the damp cloth. "People come and go," she mumbled, staring at a stain on the counter. "It's a port town." Harding pressed his voice, firming slightly. "A baby was found abandoned, Sarah. Freezing, barely alive. Someone knows something. Someone always knows something." Sarah's shoulders slumped. She looked up, her eyes wide, with a fleeting terror. I don't know anything, detective." But her voice cracked on the last word, and a tear unbidden traced a path down her pale cheek. Harding knew then. She knew more than she was letting on. She was terrified. The second thread led him to a name that kept surfacing in hushed tones whenever the subject of local secrets came up the Thorns. The Thorn family lived in a grand, imposing house on the hill overlooking the town, a stark contrast to the dilapidated port. Robert Thorn, the patriarch, was a man of immense wealth and influence, having made his fortune in shipping and real estate. He was known for his philanthropy, his perfectly tailored suits, and his unwavering dedication to his family's impeccable reputation. His wife Eleanor was a socialite, always impeccably dressed, her smile a brittle, unwavering mask. They had 2 children, a son now a successful lawyer in the city, and a daughter, Lily. It was Lily's name that kept popping up in the whispers, always followed by a knowing glance or a quick change of subject. Harding began to connect the dots. Lily, in her mid-20s, had been a radiant presence in the town until about a year ago. Then she had vanished, not dramatically, but subtly. Her appearances at social events dwindled, her once vibrant presence becoming almost spectral. Local gossip suggested she had gone abroad for studies or charity work. But in a small town like this, a complete disappearance, especially from a family like the Thorns, always left questions unanswered. Harding visited the Thorn residence. The house was magnificent cold and utterly silent. Robert Thorn met him at the door, his demeanor one of cultivated civility, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Detective Harding." Thorn said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "To what do we owe this visit?" "I'm investigating the abandoned infant found at the port, Mr. Thorn," Harding stated plainly. "My inquiries have led me here. Your daughter Lily has she been unwell, or perhaps away recently? A flicker, tiny, almost imperceptible, of something akin to panic crossed Robert Thorne's face, quickly masked by an expression of concern. Lily, she's been traveling, Detective. For her studies, as you may know, she's a private person. What could she possibly have to do with this? Just following all leads, Mr. Thorne, Harding replied, his gaze unwavering. He noticed the slight tremor in Thorne's perfectly manicured hand as he adjusted his cufflink. He noticed the way Mrs. Thorne, sitting ramrod straight in the living room, meticulously straightened a cushion, her eyes fixed on some distant point. The Thornes presented a united front, an impenetrable wall of respectability. But Harding had seen enough walls in his career to know they always had cracks, and he was determined to find them. The story of the heroic dog had brought a tiny, innocent life back from the brink, but in doing so, it had inadvertently shone a harsh, unforgiving light on the dark corners of a community and on the carefully constructed facade of a powerful family. The truth, Harding suspected, was far more sinister than anyone dared to imagine. Detective Harding was a master of patience, a predator in a finely tailored suit, waiting for his prey to reveal itself. Sarah, the timid waitress from the Rusty Anchor, was his first true crack in the meticulously constructed facade of the town. He returned to the diner, this time off duty, blending in with the few regulars observing. He noticed the furtive glances she cast towards the door, the way she jumped at sudden noises, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She was carrying a heavy burden, and Harding knew it was only a matter of time before it broke her. One quiet afternoon, when the diner was almost empty, he sat at the counter again. Instead of questions, he simply placed a newspaper in front of her. The headline screamed, "Miracle Baby Fights for Life. Hero Dog Stands Vigil." He watched her eyes scan the words, her lower lip trembling. "She's recovering, Sarah," Harding said softly, his voice devoid of accusation. "She's going to make it, but someone left her to die." Sarah's composure shattered. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I couldn't. I was afraid." She choked out, her voice muffled. Harding waited, offering a comforting silence that was more effective than any interrogation technique. Finally, Sarah lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "It was Lily." She whispered the name, a painful admission. Lily Thorne. The dam broke. Sarah, tears streaming down her face, began to recount a story born of desperation and cruelty. Lily Thorne, the perfect daughter of the powerful Robert Thorne, had fallen in love with a young man from out of town, a fisherman, a good, kind soul, but utterly without status or wealth. Their affair had been passionate secret and had resulted in a pregnancy. Mr. Thorne, he found out. Sarah recounted, her voice trembling. He was furious, said it would ruin their name, destroy their legacy. He sent the young man away, threatened him with ruin if he ever returned, and he kept Lily a virtual prisoner in that house. Sarah had been Lily's only confidant, a distant cousin through marriage, who worked for the Thorne household as a cleaner before moving to the diner. She had witnessed Lily's despair, her growing belly, the terrifying control Robert Thorne exerted. He told her he'd arrange for the baby to be taken care of. Sarah continued, her voice filled with disgust. He promised her a new life abroad, away from the scandal. But Lily, she knew what he meant. She was terrified. The night of the blizzard, Lily, desperate and terrified, had gone into labor prematurely. Sarah secretly had been there trying to help. Robert Thorne, fearing discovery, had refused to call a doctor. He wanted it to be quiet, to be a secret. Sarah sobbed. He told her if she didn't agree to give the baby up, he'd disown her, destroy her. He said he'd make sure she never worked, never found peace again. After the birth, weak and traumatized, Lily had been forced by her father to take the newborn to the abandoned port. He chose the container himself. Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with horror. He said it was isolated, that no one would find it until spring. He told her it was the only way to protect her, to protect the family. He promised he'd arrange for someone to pick up the baby, later to take it to an orphanage, far away. Lily, she was barely conscious, too weak to fight. Sarah had tried to argue to intervene, but Robert Thorne's rage was a terrifying force. He had physically prevented her from calling for help. He threatened me too, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Said he'd ruin my family, make sure I never worked again, that I'd be homeless. Fear had paralyzed her, forcing her complicity in the unspeakable act. But her conscience had never let her rest. I tried to go back, Sarah confessed, her voice thick with anguish. The next day, when the storm cleared a bit, I tried. But the snow was too deep, and I was too scared. I kept telling myself someone else would find it. But I knew he wanted it to die. Harding listened, his face a mask of grim determination. The pieces clicked into place, forming a horrific mosaic of arrogance, power, and cold-blooded cruelty. Robert Thorne, the pillar of the community, the man who prided himself on his family's reputation, was a monster. The heroic dog, the abandoned baby. They were not random acts of fate. They were the desperate cry of a truth that had been buried under layers of wealth, influence, and heartless ambition. The time for subtlety was over. Harding had all he needed. Detective Harding stood before the imposing oak doors of the Thorne mansion, the weight of Sarah's confession pressing down on him. The chill in the air, though less severe than the night of the storm, still carried a stark contrast to the opulence of the house. He rang the bell, the chime echoing with an almost mocking cheerfulness through the silent grand halls. Robert Thorne himself answered, impeccably, dressed as always, a strained smile on his lips. Detective Harding, to what do I owe the pleasure? I trust your investigation into the unfortunate incident is progressing. His tone was smooth-laced with a false cordiality. It is Mr. Thorne, most thoroughly, Harding replied, his gaze unwavering, and it has led me directly back to you. Thorne's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. I assure you, the detective, my family has cooperated fully. We have nothing to hide. On the contrary, Mr. Thorne, Harding said, stepping past him into the marble foyer, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I believe you have everything to hide, and it's time that changes. He led Thorne into the vast, ornate living room, a space filled with expensive antiques and an oppressive silence. Mrs. Thorne sat stiffly on a velvet sofa, a teacup clinking against its saucer in her trembling hand. Her eyes darted between her husband and the detective, fear thinly veiled beneath her polished composure. This is about your daughter Lily, isn't it? Harding began cutting straight to the chase. And the baby found at the port. Robert Thorne's face hardened. My daughter has nothing to do with this. She has been abroad for months pursuing her studies. I've already told you this. She was never abroad, Mr. Thorne. Harding counted his voice, like chipped ice. She was here, held against her will, pregnant, and you, sir, forced her to abandon her newborn child in a freezing container, hoping it would die, all to protect your family reputation. Thorne's cultivated veneer cracked. That is an outrageous accusation, Detective Slander. I will have your badge for this. He pounded a fist on a delicate antique table, making Mrs. Thorne flinch. Sarah confessed, Mr. Thorne. Harding stated, watching Thorne's reaction closely. Every detail, the young man Lily loved, your rage, the confinement, the premature birth, the forced abandonment, she was there. A vein throbbed visibly in Thorne's temple. That girl is a liar, a disgruntled employee. She's trying to extort us. She's a frightened young woman who carries the weight of your monstrous secret. Harding retorted, his voice gaining momentum. And there are others. The doctor who treated Lily's exhaustion months ago, confused by her sudden reclusiveness. The local clinic nurse who anonymously called a tip line about an unusual request for a midwife for a home birth around the time Lily supposedly left the country. The taxi driver who saw Lily heavily pregnant being escorted by your security team into this house last year, not to an airport. Harding pulled out a folder. We also have security footage from a gas station near the port taken the night of the storm. It shows a car matching yours, Mr. Thorne, driving towards the abandoned docks, then leaving hours later. And a faint, almost imperceptible image of a large dark-haired dog following the car, drawn by a scent. He paused, letting the implications sink in. The German shepherd Rex. He didn't just stumble upon the baby, Mr. Thorne. He was likely drawn by the residual scent of the baby you abandoned. He followed you, and he became the unwitting hero who exposed your depravity. Mrs. Thorne let out a choked sob, burying her face in her hands. Robert Thorne for the first time seemed truly rattled. His shoulders sagged, and the bluster drained from his face, revealing a man stripped bare of his pretense. The meticulous control he had wielded for so long was crumbling around him. You left an innocent child to die, Mr. Thorne. Harding continued, his voice cold with condemnation. In a broken port, in a blizzard, for your reputation. And by some miracle, that child lived, thanks to a dog you probably never even considered. The community, Mr. Thorne, is already rallying around that baby. The story of the heroic dog who saved her is everywhere. Your name, your legacy, is about to be irrevocably tied to this act of unforgivable cruelty. Thorne swallowed hard, his eyes flickering around the opulent room, as if seeing it for the first time as a gilded cage built on lies. The public's adoration for the hero dog and the miracle baby would only amplify his fall, turning him from a respected figure into a symbol of merciless villainy. He had sought to control the narrative, to bury a truth, but life and a loyal German shepherd had a way of bringing justice to light. The battle for his reputation was over, and he had lost. Catastrophically, the truth once unearthed spread like wildfire through the small town. Robert Thorne, once untouchable, was now publicly disgraced, his meticulously crafted image crumbling into dust. The local authorities moved swiftly, armed with Sarah's testimony and Detective Harding's meticulous evidence. Thorne was arrested, the charges of child endangerment and conspiracy, to conceal a birth carrying a severe weight. His wealth and influence, once his greatest assets, now served only to highlight the depths of his depravity. The community, initially shocked, quickly turned its collective back on him, disgusted by the sheer callousness of his actions. Meanwhile, Lily Thorne, pale and fragile, was finally free. Detective Harding had ensured her immediate safety, and with the help of a compassionate social worker, began the slow process of reconnecting her with the outside world. The news of her baby's survival and the heroic dog who had saved her reached Lily in the quiet room where she was recovering. It was a torrent of emotions, overwhelming relief, profound guilt, and a burgeoning, unfamiliar hope. The social worker, understanding the unique bond, gently suggested a reunion with Rex. Elias Hemlock, who had formerly adopted Rex and brought him home from the shelter, happily agreed. The reunion took place not in the sterile hospital, but in the peaceful, sun-drenched garden of Elias's small cottage, where Rex had begun to truly heal, regaining strength and a glimmer of his former spirit. Lily was wheeled out, her eyes wide, still somewhat hollow, from her ordeal, but alight with anticipation. When Rex saw her, he froze, his head tilted, his powerful nose twitching. He remembered the scent faintly from the night in the container, the scent of the woman who was the baby's mother, the one who had, however, unwillingly left his precious charge. A low whine rumbled in his chest, a mix of confusion and a deep-seated recognition. Elias knelt beside Rex, reassuring him. "It's okay, boy. This is Lily. She's the baby's mother." Lily, still weak, slowly extended a trembling hand towards Rex. "Hello, Rex," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for saving her." Rex approached cautiously, sniffing her outstretched hand. He felt no malice, only profound sorrow, and a fragile hope radiating from her. He nuzzled her hand, a soft, tentative gesture. It was an unspoken absolution, a recognition of their shared trauma and the miracle they had both experienced. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The social worker carefully brought the baby, now named Hope, by the hospital staff, out to the garden. Hope, though still tiny, was thriving. Her skin had regained a healthy pink hue, and her eyes, bright and curious, scanned the world around her. Lily gasped, a heart-wrenching sob escaping her lips as she reached for her daughter. The social worker gently placed Hope into Lily's arms. It was a moment of profound, sacred reunion. A mother embracing the child she thought she had lost forever. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she held Hope close, murmuring apologies and promises into the baby's soft hair. As Lily cradled Hope, Rex, who had been watching intently, slowly approached. He nudged Lily's knee, then nudged Hope's tiny, blanket-wrapped foot. Hope, feeling the soft fur, stirred. She looked up, her bright, innocent eyes fixing on Rex's amber gaze. And then a smile. A wide, gummy, utterly pure smile spread across her face. With surprising strength, Hope lifted a tiny, dimpled hand and with an unhesitating gesture reached out and grabbed a handful of Rex's thick fur. She gurgled a happy, joyous sound that echoed through the quiet garden. Everyone present, Elias Eleanor from the shelter, Detective Harding, even the stoic social worker, felt a collective catch in their throats. It was an undeniable recognition, a profound connection between the tiny human and the magnificent animal who had defied all odds to save her. Rex, for his part, leaned into the baby's touch, his tail giving a slow, gentle thump against the grass. In that moment, the unspoken bond forged in the freezing depths of a broken container was fully realized, a testament to loyalty, resilience, and the purest form of love. Justice had been served, and now healing could truly begin. Life, like the relentless tides, always finds a way to move forward, even after the most devastating storms. For Lily, now freed from the tyrannical grip of her father, Robert Thorne, a new chapter, began, tentative but filled with a burgeoning hope. Her physical recovery was slow, but the emotional scars ran deeper. With the unwavering support of Elias Hemlock, Eleanor Vance, and the compassionate community that had rallied around her, and Hope Lily began the arduous journey of healing. Elias, with his quiet strength and profound kindness, became a surrogate father figure to Lily. He offered her a small, comfortable room in his cottage, a haven of peace away from the painful memories of the Thorne mansion. He shared his simple meals, his wisdom, and the comforting rhythm of his life by the sea. Eleanor, from the animal shelter, regularly visited with Rex, who quickly became an indispensable part of their makeshift family. Rex, once a broken shadow of a dog, had blossomed under Elias's care. His coat regained its shine, his muscles their strength, and the weariness in his amber eyes was slowly replaced by a bright, alert intelligence. But his bond with Hope remained the most extraordinary. He was her silent guardian, her furry shadow. He would lie patiently by her crib, his head resting on his paws, his gaze unwavering. As Hope grew, he would gently nudge toys towards her, his tail thumping a soft rhythm of contentment when she giggled. He would follow Lily's every move instinctively, knowing when Hope needed a diaper change or a feed, often nudging Lily's hand towards the baby's restless stirrings. It was a partnership of profound understanding, born of shared trauma and solidified by unconditional love. Lily, watching the beautiful, unbreakable connection between her daughter and the magnificent German shepherd, found strength she never knew she possessed. Rex's unwavering loyalty was a constant reminder of the goodness that still existed in the world, a stark contrast to the betrayal she had experienced. She dedicated herself to Hope, cherishing every smile, every milestone. The baby, now thriving, was a beacon of light, a living testament to resilience and the extraordinary power of an unexpected bond. The local town, initially buzzing with the scandal of Robert Thorne's arrest and the miracle of Hope's rescue, slowly began to heal too. The port, once a symbol of neglect, and the sight of such profound despair, became a place of quiet reflection. Community members, inspired by the story, began organizing cleanup efforts, slowly transforming the dilapidated docks. There was talk of turning part of it into a small memorial park, a place to honor the incredible bond between a German shepherd and an abandoned baby, a testament to hope found in the most unlikely of places. Lily, though still processing the deep emotional wounds, started to envision a future. She began volunteering at the animal shelter, helping Eleanor care for other abandoned animals. She found solace in giving back, in offering the same kindness and protection that Rex had selflessly given to her daughter. She even started to explore legal avenues to completely sever ties with her father, to build a life for herself and Hope, free from the shadow of his cruelty. The story of Rex and Hope, the German shepherd who found a baby sleeping in a broken port, wasn't just a local legend. It was a powerful narrative of redemption, of second chances, and of the profound truth that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes come in the most unexpected forms. It was a story that affirmed the enduring power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unbreakable bonds that can form between even the most disparate of souls, bringing light to the darkest of times. Years gently folded into each other, weaving a new fabric of life for Lily Hope and their beloved Rex. The old broken port, once a symbol of despair and a testament to human cruelty, had undergone a remarkable transformation. Inspired by the unwavering spirit of the miracle baby and her canine guardian, the community had rallied. The crumbling docks were reinforced, the abandoned containers removed, and in their place, a vibrant waterfront park bloomed. Green lawns now sloped gently to the water's edge, dotted with benches, and a small, tasteful monument, a bronze sculpture of a German shepherd, its head gently resting on a small, swaddled bundle. It was a silent, powerful testament to the day an extraordinary bond defied the darkness. Hope, now a bright-eyed, vivacious 5-year-old, was a whirlwind of energy. Her laughter, clear and joyful, often echoed through the park, a stark contrast to the whimpers that had once marked her beginning. She had Lily's gentle features, but a spark of playful mischief in her eyes. Rex, though his muzzle was now dusted, with more grey remained her steadfast companion. He trotted faithfully by her side, his tail a constant rhythmic thump, a silent affirmation of his enduring love. Hope would often drape herself over his broad back, whispering secrets into his floppy ears, confident in his unwavering attention. Lily, no longer the timid, traumatized young woman, had found her voice. She had completed her studies not abroad, as her father had intended, but locally focusing on social work and animal welfare. She became a vocal advocate for abused children and neglected animals. Her personal story lending a powerful resonance to her words. Robert Thorne, stripped of his power and reputation, served his sentence, a stark reminder of the fall that hubris and cruelty could bring. Eleanor Vance, the shelter manager, became Lily's close friend and mentor, and together they transformed the local animal shelter into a thriving sanctuary, a beacon of hope for countless abandoned creatures. One crisp autumn afternoon, Lily brought Hope and Rex to the newly dedicated Hope and Rex Memorial Park. The air was filled with the scent of salty sea breeze and fallen leaves. Hope ran ahead, her small legs pumping Rex, lumbering happily behind her. They stopped at the bronze sculpture. "Look, Rexy," Hope chirped, pointing a tiny finger at the statue. "That's us." Rex nudged her hand, a soft rumble in his chest. He didn't understand the intricacies of bronze and artistry, but he understood the warmth of her hand, the joy in her voice. He understood that they were here together, and that was all that mattered. Lily watched them, a serene smile gracing her lips. The scars of her past remained, but they no longer defined her. They had become a part of her strength, her empathy. She thought of the day Rex had been found, curled around her tiny, freezing baby. She thought of the desperate fight for survival, the revelation of her father's monstrous act, and the incredible kindness of Elias Eleanor and the entire community. The story of the German shepherd found sleeping in a broken port, and what the baby did next had indeed left everyone in tears. But they were tears of sorrow for the injustice, tears of awe for the miracle, and ultimately tears of profound joy for the triumph of love, loyalty, and redemption. It was a legend woven into the very fabric of the town, whispered by parents to their children, a powerful reminder that even in the darkest corners of human experience, light can be found, often in the most unexpected forms. The unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog, forged in the crucible of desperation, had become a beacon of hope, a legacy that would inspire for generations to come. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more tales of courage, loyalty, and unexpected heroes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming and dramatic stories to life. What was your favorite moment in Rex and Hope's journey? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're here, be sure to check out our other videos. There's always more to explore and more incredible stories waiting for you. Stay with us for the next one.